My Govanim, welcome back to Medieval Art. I'm Dr. Brian Keane, and I'm here with Dave Lewis of Cinemillennials to continue our conversation about Tolkien's Legendarium. Tolkien was a professor of Old English at Oxford, a translator, philologist, and medievalist whose love of medieval literature and folklore deeply influenced The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, and many other writings. So, Dave, I'd like to have a conversation with you about some of those medieval influences. Let's look at the Poetic Edda, Beowulf, the Mabinogion, and the Kalevala to think about the motifs and the themes and the characters that brought to life Middle-earth.
I would say what we should start with absolutely first is the Poetic Edda. It is a collection of Norse mythological texts, really poems, in the idea of the kennings, the traditional Norse storytelling, the bardic storytelling tradition. And it was later compiled together in the 13th century Codex Regius. And it centers on the tales of the Norse gods, all the ones that we're familiar with Marvel, where you have Loki, you have Odin, you have Thor, and many others. And it talks about these dark themes of fate and doom, while also having a contrasting worldview of heroism and courage in this whole very northern idea of it. Tolkien really was influenced this in so many ways, mostly through his dwarves. So within the dwarves of the Poetic Edda, they forge Mjolnir. Or Jonathan, as many Marvel fans call Thor's hammer. They create these powerful artifacts that move the way in which the world works. You also get almost all of the 13 dwarf names from the Poetic Edda in this role of all of these creatures, most specifically actual dwarves and elves, where you get Thorin, Balin, Dwalin, Fili, Kili, Owen, Glowin, Nori, Dori, Ori, Bifur, Boffer, and Bomber, and then you also get Aldurin, which is the name for Gandalf, his original name as a Maya.
And I'm glad that you mentioned Marvel because I think viewers will also be familiar with the concept of Ragnarok and this idea of an apocalyptic battle at the end of time or the destruction of a world. And that does parallel Tolkien's idea of the Dagor Dagorath and this ending epic in Middle-earth of the War of the Ring. So there's lots to sort of think about. We also get the great hero Sigurd, who slays a dragon, which is a parallel in some ways to Bilbo's encounter with Smaug. So there's lots of great material that I hope our viewers will go back and read as well. And what about in Beowulf? You know, this is one of the great works that, of course, Tolkien contributed to the long scholarship of, as when we're really indebted to the professor's work on Beowulf. So what were some of your thought pieces with Beowulf?
He changes the game when it comes to Beowulf criticism, because he goes from, in his 1936 lecture, Beowulf, the Monsters, and the Critics, he says that we don't have to use Beowulf as this idea of a historical text. We don't have to criticize it from a historical text. We can also criticize it from a literary idea. And from there, the rest of the world just runs with it. And, Brian's talking about Sigurd and Fafnir. He's also getting this idea from the confrontation of Beowulf, Beowulf's confrontation of the dragon in that, where there's a horde that this dragon is guarding, and Beowulf and Wiglaf, his companion, try to conquer this and win the horde. And then they're also deeply indebted to Anglo-Saxon culture depicted in Beowulf as well, where you have the men and women of Rohan, and their culture as a whole is deeply inspired by the heroic code of Beowulf.
And I think that's what always sort of stands out to me is that the language and the culture of Rohan, and even thinking about King Theoden, one of these great figures in Tolkien's Legendarium, his sort of weakness but later resurgence. We sort of see that as well in this theme of the wise king and wise kingship as a theme in Beowulf. But I also think the manuscript itself, the famous Cotton MS Vitellius A15, that survives from this great fire as a unicum text that then is reminiscent of the Book of Mazar Bull, this manuscript that Tolkien himself designs and creates and intended to have facsimiles of in the publication of his writings. So there's a lot more to think about even with Beowulf, as we know. But if we move into another great work that I admit as a medievalist I've never fully made it through, and so I hand in my medieval card if I need to, but it's the sequence of Welsh mythology in the Mabinogion. So, Dave, this is where I need your great expertise in pronunciation for all of these wonderful worlds and ideas. But for me, I think it is the idea of Welsh and Finnish being the background for the great Sindarin Elven tongue in Middle Earth. But what is your love of the Mabinogion?
Yes. Tolkien absolutely loved Cymraeg ever since he saw it on the side of coal trucks when he was stationed in Wales during the First World War, when he was training. And as a Welsh American myself, I feel it's my duty to enlighten people about its influence on Tolkien's Legendarium. Now, when you're talking about the Book of Marzabul, another revered manuscript in Tolkien's Legendarium is the Red Book of Westmarch, which is the compilation of Bilbo's story, Frodo and Sam's story, and other supplemental things that Bilbo translated when he was staying in Rivendell, and then eventually the works that Tolkien published, and maybe some things that haven't been published yet. But that is likely based off of the Red Book of Hergest, which is Jesus College, Oxford, MS 111, a 14th century manuscript that contains Welsh prose and poetry and history, as well as the Welsh national epic, the Mabinogion, or the branches of the Mabinogi. Now, one of the major influences on Tolkien's Legendarium is the story of Cilwch and Olwen, in which Cilwch is cruelly tasked by Olwen's otherworldly father with finding all of the treasures of Britain in order to win his daughter's hand. That's the only way he could do it. Now, Cilwch, knowing that this is a near impossible task, doesn't know what to do until he remembers that he has an ace in his hand. And that is when he asks his uncle, King Arthur, to borrow his most famous weapon, the most famous weapon in all of medieval history. And that is Celadvolch, aka Excalibur, to accomplish the mission. And if that doesn't sound like the tale of Beren and Luthien, I don't know what does. But the story that really put the rocket to Tolkien's imagination when it comes to developing Arda as a whole, that is the Kalevala. And I know Brian absolutely loves the Kalevala. So Brian, take it away.
I mean, I think it is that distinction where, for me, the first entrance after Tolkien into his medievalizing world was the Kalevala with the Mabinogion. I only sort of more recently was thinking about it, these magical realms of forest, lakes, and rivers that remind me of Lorien and Rivendell. But with the Kalevala, I think it was this sense of, incredible and incredibly powerful figures like the wizard hero Vaithnamonen, who reminds me so much of Gandalf or Tom Bombadil or Luthien, and the relationship between song and magic in creating the world. I mean, every time I read the Ainu Lindale at the beginning of the Silmarillion, I think about this sense of Middle Earth coming about through the creation of the music of the Ainur and these divine beings who sing the world into existence. That's the real love that I had as a teenager and even to the present. So the Kalevala is this piece that, like so many of Tolkien's writings, were based on long-standing oral traditions that are maybe penned, written down later, preserved in manuscripts. But this being one of the latest of the medievalizing sources that would inspire Tolkien's many writings. So there's so much more that we can say as we pull apart Tolkien's Legendarium and the influences. I know we're looking forward to having another discussion about Arthuriana, picking up even from the conversations we've had today about the Mabinogion. We can think about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Farmer Giles of Ham, the fall of Arthur, and including Pearl, I think, within that as a way to bring us full circle on some of the influences that Professor had in creating Middle Earth. So Dave, give us some closing words as we round out this segment on Tolkien's medievalisms in the formation of Middle Earth.
Thank you so much for joining us as we explore Tolkien's medieval inspirations, from Old Norse gods to Old English heroes to Welsh quests and Finnish wizards. These medieval sources provided Tolkien with the mythological framework to help him build the timeless and intricate world of Arda and Middle Earth. Until next time, Namarie.
Namarie.